Alrighty, we're going to show everybody how Harlan Clarke got started. But before we get started on that, we'd like to thank each and every one of you for all of your support on these videos. Okay, now right up here is Holmes Road, and Holmes Road runs all the way down towards Cullen. But on the other side of Holmes Road was not part of Houston until 1956. That's when they annexed it. Okay, we right up here on Scott and Holmes Road. And Houston didn't annex Sunnyside until 1956. But before Houston annexed Sunnyside, it was really Sunnyside, Texas. And then it would go all the way down to Alameda. And then on the other side of Alameda was called Alameda, Texas. Houston annexed all of that in the 1950s. All right, we're going down Holmes Road here. And as we get up here towards Alameda, and like I say, we're in Sunnyside, Texas now because we're on the other side of the railroad track. And Holmes Road was just like it was a road. This was the difference between a road and a street is that a road don't have pavement, and a street is like we riding on now. It's a pavement. That's the reason why they had to build the Astrodome. As you can see, the Astrodome was built on the outskirts of Houston, Texas. See, it's on the other side of the railroad track. You see, on this side of the railroad track, it wasn't considered as Houston. That's why they built it on the other side, and they eventually annexed it. As you can see, this is Holmes Road, and they cut off. And they had it cut off because they built the new subdivision, which was Harlan Clarke. And Harlan Clarke was built in 1965 is when this neighborhood opened up in 1965. And this was and when they opened it up, and the medical center and them opened up this neighborhood, it was for whites only. And this was the first neighborhood where blacks got to buy a brand new home. Because the homes in South Park wasn't brand new. But when they opened up this area here, Harlan Clarke, it was a brand new community. And it was built for whites only. But in 1964, President Johnson signed a civil rights bill. You could not discriminate against housing. So blacks could move out here. And these white people were mad. Yeah, the Ku Klux Klan was burning crosses on some of these people lots when they came out here. But this is a very historical place, and most of all, Mr. Harlan Clarke, this is the area that he would ride his horse down, because see, this was not a street. Mr. Harlan Clarke, the history of him, he was the vice president of Houston Light and Power Company. And it was him who built this community because they didn't have no power out here. It was Mr. Harlan Clarke who came out here and built the first electrical power center. And he was working for Houston Light and Power Company, which later on became Centerpoint that we know today. And all this is what Mr. Harlan Clarke would ride his horse down. Because he couldn't drive no car down here because all this was woods. But he had to come down here to put a power plant, so when they did build this community, that these people would have power, electricity. And that's why you see all of those power plants down, those electrical poles up here. Because Mr. Harlan Clarke used this street that we riding on today. It was a trail, but this is the trail that he used when he was developing this community. And it was developed for whites only. But in 1965, when the community opened up, it was whites only. But blacks could move out here, but they tried to keep blacks out from moving out here in 65. But around 67, they couldn't stop it because they was having all kind of problems in court about discriminating. That the people out here were still discriminating against blacks. So blacks started moving in here in the late 60s, 68, 69. Yes, blacks was living out here. But the white people were still living out here. White people did not leave Harlan Clarke until the early 70s, before they actually really left out here. And they built James Madison in 1965, a high school for these white kids. And they built William Hobby, the elementary school for the white kids. And they also built Dick Dowling for a middle school for the white kids. But this road here is the road that Mr. Harlan Clarke took. And Harlan Clarke community, which was part of Alameda, Texas, they had 3 major streets. They had Orem, Fuquay, and the cutoff road was Anderson Road. And right there is Sims Bayou. They needed a place to drain the water when it flooded down here. So Sims Bayou is the same Sims Bayou that runs into Sunnyside. And it also runs through Alameda, Texas. But remember, Houston annexed it, all of that, in 1956. Houston had already annexed this land out here that we call Harlan Clarke in 1950. But they didn't start developing this land until the late 59 is when they started developing this area out here. And by the time they got it as a community, this community opened up in 1965. And it was called Harlan Clarke, and it was for whites only. But it was less than 3 years blacks could move in here. They could move in here when it was brand new, because it was illegal and to discriminate against housing. But white people used to have loopholes where they couldn't sell it to them because they find out they black, then they act like they can't sell it because there's some old technical reason. They wouldn't sell it to them because they was black. They find another reason not to sell it to them. But eventually, around 1967, 68, they had ran out of ways not to stop blacks from moving out here. And as you can see, this is Anderson Road. That's why it dead end right now. We're right here in Alameda, Texas. That's what it used to be before Houston annexes. As you can see, there's a sign telling you Alameda Genoa one way, which was taking you to Sunnyside, Texas. And over here, you see the sign that tell you West Fuquay, which is taking you to Alameda, Texas. That's how you could tell the difference. And they used to have a bank up here, used to be called Alameda State Bank. Okay, we're in Harlan Clarke, and we're doing the history of Harlan Clarke. When the community came out here, thanks to Mr. Harlan Clarke for bringing the power and electricity out here in this community. That's why you have the power plant, which was the first power plant built by Mr. Harlan Clarke. And it's located up there on Highway 90, which we would call South Main, right outside of Harlan Clarke. And that was able to give the people electricity out here in this community in 1965. And Fuquay was the busiest street out here. And it was a business area out here for the white people in 1965. But blacks came out here in the late 60s, 68, 69, and 70. By 70 and by the 1970s, blacks was in here. And the white people could not stop them. And the rest of it is history. And those people who, one of the major streets out here that ran off of Fuquay was White Heathers. And White Heathers and Orem, because White Heathers ran from Fuquay to Orem, and also was like part of Post Oak. But the major spots that cornered off Harlan Clarke, one end was Post Oak, and the other end is FM 521, which we know it as Alameda. And that was part of the Harlan Clarke area. And it went from South Main all the way back to Anderson Road. It covered that square mileage and here in Southwest Houston. And it was built in 1965 when this community opened up. And it was built for whites only. But it was one of the very, very few communities here in Houston that was for whites only, where blacks got an opportunity to move into a brand new house. Because the white people built these brand new houses, they worked in the medical center. That's why the community was built, for them. But the whites that lived and worked in the medical center, that worked in the administration and the nurses and the LVN and a few doctors was out here in Harlan, Clarke when they built this neighborhood up in 1965 and opened it up. And it was for whites only. But by the 1970s, blacks was in here. And whites did not enjoy an opportunity to enjoy their brand new house before they was moving out of it. And that's what made them so racist compared to South Park. Because the people in South Park, at least they got an opportunity to stay in their house for 10 or 15 years. We talking about the white people. But the white people out here in Harlan, Clarke, they never got a chance to stay in their house no more than 4 or 5 years before they had to move out and let blacks come out here and stay, because they didn't want to stay around the blacks. Because when they bought their home out here in 1965, it was understood it would be for whites only, and mainly for the whites that worked in the medical center. And those are the facts. It is part of Center Point. And this is the office that Mr. Harlan Clarke built right here for the community of Harlan, Clarke, to provide electricity to the whole community of Harlan, Clarke.